This is my Mazda Rx-8 front stationary gear that has a bearing failure due to oil starvation. As you can see the damage here, the copper part of the bearing is already exposed, and there's a part of it that was chipped off. Also the rear part, the bearing, the copper trace of the bearing is already exposed. And this stationary gear has a stopper screw version to prevent the main bearing from spinning. As you can see the stopper screw here, as you can see there, the end of the stopper screw protrudes through a hole of the main bearing to prevent the main bearing from spinning. And I have another version. Here's the non-stopper screw version, but a tab was made by the factory to prevent it from spinning. This is the front stationary gear that was included from the Mazda Rx-8 engine that I bought for only 5,000 pesos. As you can see here, there are lots of hits made by the previous mechanic. I'm sure he used a hard object, maybe a hammer, or I don't know what he used, but you can see the damage he created. The punch marks around the face of the stationary gear worries me because this part of the stationary gear should be perfect flat. And sometimes when you hit a metal, it creates a deep part of the metal, but sometimes it also creates a raised area of the metal. You don't worry about the deep part of the metal, but you worry about the raised part of the metal. When you hit a metal, it creates a deep part, and at the place where the impact hits, sometimes at the edge of that impact, it creates a raised area of the metal. So this worries me from using the stationary gear because there may be a raised part on some of the impact hits around this face of this stationary gear. I can sand this down, but sanding a flat surface that should be perfectly flat and aligned, you cannot guarantee that procedure. So I will change this from one of my stationary gear, but I'm gonna use the main bearing from this stationary gear because it's still in perfect condition. So I'll remove the main bearing from this damaged stationary gear because the stationary gear has imperfections already. I don't want to use it, but the main bearing is still good. So I'll remove the main bearing and transfer it to a more perfect stationary gear, one where there is no impact hits from its removal and during its installation. So I will transfer this bearing to one of my perfect stationary gear, one with no impact hits from a mechanic that has no good skills in assembly and disassembly. This is an evidence that all mechanics can rebuild an engine for you, but not all can do it perfectly. The mechanic who did this lacks the necessary skill and experience to rebuild an engine. For me, this is a trash. So why do we need this part of the stationary gear to be perfectly flat? We need this perfectly flat because this is where the part of the engine that holds the thrust bearing for the eccentric shaft of this rotor engine. So any imperfection, it will raise an area. Any part of the stationary gear here, where the metal plate, where the two thrust bearings roll, it will create an imbalance to the stationary gear thrust bearing. I'm sure in this condition of the stationary gear, I'm sure the thrust bearings will not last long. You can see that there are lots of impact hit during the installation of this stationary gear. You can see that's a big bearing wear. Big part of the copper trace is already exposed. That's the effect of giving too much tension to your drive belts.